You're listening to the REI Clarity Podcast, the show that guides you from confusion to clarity and sets you on the path to financial freedom faster. Learn how to grow your portfolio the right way with your host, REI advisor and co-founder of Shine Insurance, Jeremy Goodrich.
Welcome to REI Clarity. I'm your host, Jeremy Goodrich. And the episode today, I guess I should stop saying I'm excited to talk with this guest, because every single guest I have on, I find excitement around. And that's because each of them have these specific things that they're doing in the real estate investing world that are exciting, interesting, full of nuance, and just prove that there's so many different ways to do this, to go on this real estate investing journey. And none of them are particularly right or wrong. It's just how each different person is going on the journey that makes the most sense for them. And I think that's why I get so excited in every conversation. Our conversation today is with Yonah Weiss. He has a ton of knowledge about a lot of things, but there are two things that we're going to dig into in this conversation. The first is one of our pillars in the REI Clarity framework, and that's connections. Yonah Weiss knows how to create connections, particularly on social media. He has kind of mastered the process, and part of that's just because he's good at it. He is a connector. Not all of us are connectors like Yonah is, but he definitely has the process down and is going to share that with us. He's going to talk about Facebook. He's going to talk about LinkedIn, a space that he has found a way to really capitalize on and build connections in. So if you've thought about LinkedIn and you've said, I really want to get better at that space, but I really just don't get how to, this conversation is for you. He's going to break down some simple things you can do to use LinkedIn in a better way. So the first part of our conversation is all about connections. The second part is about what he does for his day job, and that is cost segregation. Maybe that's a topic that you've never heard of before, but I would encourage you to listen through that part. We really dig into the exact details of how cost segregation works and why it could be a really good tool for you to use to hold on to a little bit more of the cash that comes in through your real estate investing. We talk about the details, exactly how it works and why it's valuable. He talks about who it's valuable for and what the costs are associated with it. So you will walk away from this episode of REI Clarity with a lot more knowledge about how to make connections, how to build your community, particularly when it comes to social media. And then one tool that may be right for you when it comes to holding on to some of your money, and that is cost segregation. All right, well, let's get right into it. Here is my interview with Yonah Weiss. So tell me a little bit about your journey into the real estate space and how you found what you're doing now and how you found the connection with real estate.
I actually have it in my background. Like I said, I got a degree in history, which didn't really mean anything to me. It was kind of like, had to get the degree. I didn't really want to be in college, but it was kind of like a thing back then that everyone had to do. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. I love teaching. I'd been a teacher since I was in middle school. I had been doing teaching and tutoring and that kind of stuff, camp counselor, that youth programs. So I always loved that. And so that's really what I ended up doing. I just ended up being a teacher for many years and loved that, have a beautiful family. But at a certain point, I was like, okay, I need something more. I need not that I needed something more fulfilling. I really just needed more income. It's really what it came down to. I needed something. I was like looking for something else. And real estate was basically the thing that kind of jumped out at me that seemed like the right direction to go. And I had a bunch of friends that were doing different things in the real estate world. And one of my closest friends at the time, I just kind of gave him the idea, hey, I'm looking for something different to do. And he's like, well, yeah, why don't we do something together? And his family's owned real estate for years. He'd been a property manager. He's doing commercial financing, mortgages. And we ended up I ended up working with him and his uncle, who owned like a small boutique financing, firm. So we ended up doing some commercial mortgages together, some lending, and that really was my foot into real estate. about 5 years ago, and got a broker's license, just doing some residential brokerage, and wanted to get my feet wet, just learning everything I could. Because I'm a teacher, my passion was just like, okay, now I know something. I can help other people doing the same thing, can teach them. And it just kind of opened me up to incredible new connections in the real estate world that eventually led me to this company that I'm currently working at, which opened up more doors than I can even imagine. Because the industry is such an incredible industry, the people in real estate. And I have this kind of, and we'll get to this in a second, I have this kind of mindset and this outlook, like whatever you can do for other people, right? Just helping other people in whatever way you can, that's going to open up more doors for you along the way. So that's kind of what I did. And I started working in the cost segregation industry for this amazing company. And I really didn't know much about it at the time, but quickly became, quote unquote, an expert because I have this, thank God, this incredible skill that I can learn things really quickly and teach them. And most of the people in the cost segregation industry are either engineers or accountants. And a lot of those people aren't necessarily the most personable,
communicable. Yeah,
exactly. And so I kind of fit in very nicely working in the business development side of this company in just getting on podcasts, doing webinars, talking to people, teaching people really about this incredible thing that nobody knows about. Like you get on a call with someone like, cost what? Segregation in the 21st century? Like, what are you talking about? And so I just found it just explaining to people and just teaching people about it. And I was like, I should be doing this on a much bigger scale. So I started just putting out a lot of content on social media and all that kind of stuff, writing articles, podcasts, etc. And that's kind of where it led me to today.
I love that. I think a lot of times through this interview, I'm going to want to say, oh my gosh, me too. And so I'll start here. I was a school teacher for 13 years as well. And at some point was like, man, I love serving kids. I love educating, but I can't continue to run up credit card debt just trying to live a basic lifestyle. And so I switched to insurance. And that's still what I do today in the insurance in the real estate space. And just kind of grew up in the same way you did, saying, okay, well, how do I educate people about this piece of the puzzle? Like, how do I teach them things? How do I create videos? How do I show them how to do it? And it just seemed like there was a knack for that. And that's kind of how I got here too. We're both kind of service providers for the real estate world with a side investing strategy of our own. And so we play that same role in that same space. That's really cool. I think so many things need to be explained at the fourth grade level.
Yeah, things that you might take for granted as simple, but for most people it just kind of like goes in one ear out the other. But when you can explain it to them on that level, I think another thing about teaching is that you really develop. Someone who's a good teacher, they develop compassion. It's a trait, but it's really a skill that's learned of really caring for others and being, understanding that a student, anyone, like you have to be patient, very, very patient.
Absolutely.
And so you may have to repeat the same thing 10 times, right? Or 20 times until the student gets it or understands it and maybe explain it different ways. And I think that plays very well into what we're doing because like you can have clients come back and be like, well, does this apply to my, my multifamily? Yeah, and you can just be like,
absolutely does. Here's how.
Right?
Yeah, and I think for folks that are listening that are real estate investors and saying, okay, well, these two are talking about education and how does that apply to me? I think that being able to, looking at what you do and saying, how could I explain what I do better to the things I need, to the people I need the most connection with, or the people I need to build those relationships with, or how can I listen a little bit better even when I don't want to make sure I'm fostering those relationships? How can I have compassion for my tenants or my employees or the people that I'm working with? How can I pull all of those ideas that educators sort of inherently have to figure out into my real estate investing strategy so that I am a more profitable business owner and B, a better human being? And I think those are, as I was listening, I was like, okay, how are we connecting with real estate investors? And I think that's probably the foundation of how we are. So let's get into connections. You are on Facebook and LinkedIn in a way that I really appreciate and love. You have a Facebook group called Real Estate Connections that's active, has more than 500 members, that has great content and interesting things in it. You're helping people right now on LinkedIn learn how to have more engaging content. I've been trying to participate in that and doing not super well, but I'm really trying hard to figure out how do you get those 18 likes and 18 comments, and how do you connect with people on LinkedIn? What brought you to social media, and why do you continue to grow in that space?
So what brought me to social media, and I'll tie it into, how the connections fits in with why I stay in it really, is, I had a LinkedIn account for 10 years, right? Everyone had, people had it, and it kind of checked in once every year or 6 months or something like that. And it was kind of boring, nothing really going on. And like LinkedIn asks you like, hey, do you want to endorse so-and-so for, so remember that? And it was just like, when I checked in one day about when I started getting more into like the business development and cost segregation, I checked in on LinkedIn once, and I remember very clearly, it was about close to 3 years ago, when I saw like people posting content and videos and actually engaging, not just like sharing articles, which was what it used to be. Like you go to your newsfeed, it's just like article on this and article on that, but actually someone like posting original content, like videos or just kind of some text posts that were thought provoking. And I was like, this is weird. This is strange. I didn't really think much about it, but I kept coming back to LinkedIn. And I'll tell you why I kept coming back to LinkedIn, because I was in sales and I was like researching companies and people, and you put in Google, you try to find someone, right? Someone's, you're searching for a lead, you have a lead, and you try to find out how do I get their phone or how do I get to that? You put in someone's name into Google sometimes, and what comes up? What kept coming up at the top?
Ads.
No. Hey, yeah, well, yeah, ads come up at the top. Not when you put in someone's name usually, but what comes up at the top is LinkedIn. LinkedIn kept coming up at the top of Google search. And I was like going to LinkedIn and finding, oh yeah, this is the guy. Oh, he's in Bloomington, Indiana. It's the same name, right? Yeah, for sure. That's the guy, right? So LinkedIn became like, it was like, oh, this is a great resource for finding people. And then it kind of made the connection in my head at some point, like very early on. I was like, this is not just a great place to find people. This is a place to promote yourself, a great page. Google is putting your profile at the top of a search, which means if you can optimize your profile, when someone searches your name, find out who you are, what you do, they'll find a lot about you in a very compelling way when they look at your LinkedIn profile, which they probably will because it's at the top of the Google search.
So you're helping a lot of real estate investors do this, like get better at LinkedIn and get better at connecting. What do you see the value is for them? Like, what's an example of someone who's used LinkedIn as a part of their investing strategy to make the work they're doing better?
There's two things about LinkedIn that are incredible. And there's a lot of things. And that's why I'm so heavy on it. The one thing is the personal branding, okay? Because you can create original content, you can put yourself out there, you can create your profile to be, showing people who are going to be looking for you or finding you what you do, but the personal branding can be done in such a way that you're promoting yourself and getting in front of people. So that's the most important thing I think about this, is because people won't do business with you if they don't know who you are. So getting out there and, you go onto LinkedIn, you ask anyone like, who does cost segregation? If, you just do a post, right? Who does cost segregation? I guarantee you, without me doing anything, like 20 people will tag my name there, right? They may tag other people as well, but people know it exactly. So that's what the branding does, is that when you think of a certain concept, when you think of a certain thing, a certain business, immediately something comes to your mind. And that's done through branding, right? When you think of, like, I say, what's a fast food restaurant? Right? Immediately something comes to your mind. It doesn't matter what it is, but the reason why the thing comes to your mind, because it's in front of you all the time.
And that matters for like an investor. If you're out there, you clearly have at least a small brand. I don't think as a real estate investor, you necessarily have to have a huge brand unless you're running a syndication show and you're really trying to bring people in as junior partners or whatever. But, even as a smaller investor, if you're trying to connect with a lender, they might go look at LinkedIn and see what you're up to. If you're trying to connect with a property manager, there are a lot of folks that are going to go look at you in these spaces and see your personal brand, even if it's a tiny personal brand. Yeah. Just be able to look at who you are, what you do, and they're going to be more likely to engage with you on whatever that interaction.
They'll see you're a real person, and they'll see like you are what you say you are, and there's social proof that other people know who you are, because of that. And so that's the second thing that LinkedIn is so great about, is making those connections and building. I look at it more of like building a community, and I think you said it best when you have this Facebook group. I started the Facebook group as a spin-off from my LinkedIn connections. I want it to be like a mini LinkedIn, so to speak, for real estate, where I can kind of connect with people in that way and create content that is not on LinkedIn, because it's hard to find sometimes. And the reason why that is because there's such valuable connections in growing a community of people that are supporting you, people that are helping you, and we can help each other. And LinkedIn is incredible in doing that, because you can connect with people all over the world, all over the country. I mean, depending where you want to locate, you can find people. Like someone just posted today, I was literally in the middle of responding, and I do this a lot because, and this is kind of a side thing, but I have an incredible memory for people. Okay, so if I meet someone, I remember them. I remember the name. So LinkedIn, it's hard when you start getting, I have 15,000 connections, but it's hard to remember everyone. But I do to a certain extent. And so especially if I have a conversation with someone, I immediately remember them. So someone will ask, someone just asked, I'm traveling to to Nashville. Who should, in the real estate, who should I connect with? Right?
Yeah.
So I was just about to tag a bunch of people until we got on this call. I'll do it after we're finished over there. But the point is, I like doing that because you're able to, you're a real person, other real people, and you can very easily make those connections. You have no idea what those connections could lead to, but I've seen dozens of times people through, the connections I've made, do business together, do things together.
Do real business.
Yeah, which is incredible. It's such an amazing feeling.
I love that so much. So you're a connector at a really high level. You know how to do this. You love doing this. You connect people. It's a piece of who you see yourself as a human being.
Yeah.
For someone who's listening and isn't that person, but here's what you're saying and says, I do think that this could be really valuable, and I do need to get out there a little bit more. What's one or two steps that they could take right now to get going in connecting and building their community, which is one of our action steps in our framework, in building their community in the online space?
So like I said before, people aren't going to do business with you if they don't know who you are. So just putting yourself out there in the first place is the first step. I'm very big on creating original content on LinkedIn. I think it's a huge thing. I think you can get a lot of exposure through that. But I have an article on my profile if anyone wants to go check out. It's called the 18 Cents Challenge. And what that is basically a spin-off of what Gary Vaynerchuk coined as the $1.80 strategy, which is he would put his 2 cents on 90 different pieces of content every single day. So 2 cents times 90 is $1.80. He's like, put your 2 cents. So consume 90 pieces of content on Instagram or on social media every day, and you'll get a lot of exposure through that. So the point of that is, and why I feel so strong about this and why I created the article, kind of a bite size of that you can actually take 9 pieces of content is much more doable than 90.
I think so too. Yeah.
The point of doing that is you can add so much value to other people by commenting on their social media, their posts, their content. And by doing it, you do 2 things. You add value to other people. So you're helping them. And so this is what you asked, how do you go out there and connect with people? Well, one way of connecting with people is giving to them, because people remember you. If you give to them, if you do something for them, people will remember you for the most part. And the second thing is it actually gives you more exposure, because especially if you're commenting on strategically the right pieces of content that will get a lot of visibility, then everyone who sees that will see you and your name and your brand and your tagline, which is a great way of telling people who you are and what you do. So those are 2 huge action steps, I would say, creating the original content, but again, just commenting on others.
I love that so much. Because it's sort of like going to networking and
exactly.
In a traditional networking environment, you kind of walk up to someone, maybe it's a little uncomfortable, and you introduce yourself and you start to talk, and now you have a relationship, and then you do that again and again, and it's adding value to other people in the conversations you have, like the one we're having right now. It's, connecting with people that maybe can help you out in the future, and I think that all starts to snowball.
Absolutely.
So if you're looking for something to do, go out, connect with Yonah and maybe comment on one of the things that he's been doing out there, and try and comment on, if you make 9 comments, let's not be trolling people. Let's go out, make positive, effective, thoughtful comments that actually help to uplift the world a little bit, but connect out there in that social media space. I really love that. We're going to take a quick break in a second, Yonah, and then we're going to go to cost segregation. We're going to break it down in a really clear, really easy to understand way. Is there anything else you want to say about connections and connecting before we take that quick break?
Yeah, I would just add one thing, which I think I'm very passionate about, is that the real way to do it, and this is how I feel very strongly about, is to do it altruistically. Meaning, don't make that connection to get something out of it. There are plenty of people, I've tried to, and I'm going as far as like someone has, make introductions, someone has an investment and they want looking for a seller, and yeah, maybe you can get in if you did it in such a way, you signed an NDA and you got someone, you can get a commission out of that. You're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? You can get so much more out of it if you think in the big picture, in the long game, out of just making a connection between two people. If you know someone's selling, someone's buying something, someone's looking for an insurance, someone's looking for that, and just say, hey, I know a guy, I know someone I work with. This is great. Make that introduction, and don't think about, well, can I get a little commission on that?
Right.
Maybe you'll get something. Maybe they'll give it, but don't look for it. Don't do it for that purpose.
I 100% agree with that, and I have taken that mentality always, just like do good. One of the things I've struggled with is how to turn the corner, though. If you're like, I've done a lot of good with this person, I know I could do business with them, I know I could take great care of them. How do I turn that corner and make that ask? Do you have any thoughts or insights about how to turn the corner when it's time?
It's a delicate, line to cross, and it really depends on what your strategy is. So if you do want to turn that corner and you do want to start getting paid for certain types of things, it's definitely a way to go about doing it. And I would be just upfront and transparent about it from the beginning, if that's your way of going about doing it. If you're really truly about just trying to add value and knowing and believing that it's going to come back to you tenfold, then do it that way. But I don't think there's really a good way of coming back after the fact and being like, hey, by the way, you remember that guy I sent you last year? I'm sure he made a lot of money. You mind giving me a little kickback? People,
no, that's not what I'm saying at all. But yeah, that would be weird. No, that's just doing good. I kind of just mean if you can do business with someone, at some point, sometimes I struggle a little bit with I don't even want to ask. I just want to keep doing good and don't really want to dig into that whole side. But, sometimes you do have to turn the corner a little bit. All right, so we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to talk about cost segregation and how it can help any investment property owner with their bottom line. This episode of REI Clarity is brought to you by Shine Insurance. Shine Insurance is the #1 insurance specialist for real estate investors. We work with investors who have more than 10 units of single-family, multifamily, or commercial real estate. At Shine, our process is simple, our policies are smart, and when you need us, we shine. One of the questions I get from the gutsiest of investors is, Jeremy, how do you get paid? And it's a great question because when we send a proposal to a client, there's a number on it, a price, and that is all they pay. That is the only money that they pay, and it seems kind of like they just send it to the company. And so a lot of people wonder how independent insurance agents get paid, and they kind of don't want to ask because it feels a little weird. So I wanted to answer it for you. Most independent insurance agents get paid by commission from the insurance companies that they write the business with. So when you get a quote for $10,000, that $10,000 quote is all that you pay, but I'm going to get some of that money back from the insurance company. And generally speaking, that's about 12% of what you're paying. So if you ever wondered how much money that your insurance agent was making, it's usually around 12% of whatever the premium is that you're paying. So there you go. Now you know. So if you are an investor in the Midwest, and from that I mean South Carolina all the way up through Wisconsin, you have a portfolio larger than 10 units, and you believe your insurance advisor is an important part of your team, Shine is right for you. Take 10 minutes right now to go to shineinsurance.com and change the way you feel about insurance. All right, we're back with Yonah Weiss. He is the cost segregation expert. He also is a connector in the social media world and just really loves connecting like we talked about before the break. Yonah, again, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure. Thanks so much.
So I want to break down cost segregation with the idea in mind that folks listening to this show may not have any idea what it is. So can you really kind of baby step us into the concept of cost segregation?
Sure. It's, let's just understand it from the basic levels. It's really just an advanced form of depreciation. That's all cost segregation is. It's a weird way of saying I'm breaking down the building into different different costs. Okay, I'm segregating the costs. I'm depreciating the property in different components. So let's just talk about depreciation. We'll understand how we can break it down and do it in an advanced way. And why we need to know that is because it's a tax deduction. It's a tax benefit. So income tax is the biggest expense that any business or individual has. And real estate is known for having tax benefits, right? They say one of the greatest things about real estate investing is the tax benefits. Well, guess what? What are those tax benefits? Well, the biggest one is depreciation and cost segregation.
Can you describe depreciation?
Yeah, let's do that. Absolutely. So depreciation means the definition, which it's really a borrowed term. It means something's going down in value as time goes on. But it's a borrowed term when it comes to real estate and taxes because the IRS created this deduction that when you buy a property, you now get to take a tax write-off of the entire value of your property based on the concept that it will be going down in value. It's like losing value as time goes on, even though we all know that really properties are going up in value as time goes on.
So a car goes down in value over time. Right. I think we can all wrap our mind around it. And so depreciation on a car, the losing of value on a car kind of makes sense.
Yes.
But on a property, that's not really how it works. I mean, the wood and drywall and roof gets older.
It does.
I guess.
It does.
Like
and you will have to replace it eventually. But the reason why it's such a borrowed term is because that schedule of depreciation starts the day you buy the property. So even if you've owned a property for 20 years, you sell it, the new owner takes the purchase price that he paid for it and now gets to take a 27.5-year schedule where he can now write off the entire value over that time. He sells it 20 years later. The new buyer gets to take that purchase price and get to write that off over another 27.5 years. So that's why I say it's a borrowed term. If it was intrinsically, like a car, then if the property's been there for 27.5 years, you would no longer be able to claim that depreciation deduction.
Right. And you would, if it was 10 years old, you would buy it at like half the price you would have bought it 10 years before, which obviously isn't how it worked. So you mentioned 27.5 years is how much time from the point you purchase the property to the time that it's considered entirely depreciated. So the value of the home in this borrowed term goes from whatever you bought it for to zero, or over the course of 27.5 years. Do I have that right?
Right. So it's not like the property is actually going down in value, just the IRS is giving you a tax deduction based as if it were. And that's all that depreciation is. It's a tax deduction.
Okay. So yeah. So we understand depreciation then. It's this tax deduction, whether it actually should, the word should be used that or not. That's to be argued about. But then cost segregation comes into that depreciation mix how?
Cost segregation is just taking the property and instead of taking the entire amount and depreciating that over 27.5 years, an engineer can come to the property, a cost segregation engineer, and find and identify in the property things that actually, according to the tax code, depreciate on a faster schedule. So basically what we're doing is we're breaking down the property into different categories and identifying those things that depreciate faster so that we can take those tax deductions faster. Essentially, that's all we're doing. So, for example, and really we break down the property into 4 different categories. Land, which actually does not depreciate. So, like I said before, you take the purchase price, you always have to subtract a certain amount for land. And then whatever's left over, that's what we're actually going to be deducting from the purchase price. Then there's the building. Okay, and the building and the main structural components, that's really the only part of the property that depreciates on a 27.5-year schedule. But everything else, what we're breaking out of that, what we are identifying is the 2 other categories, which are land improvements, which depreciate on a 15-year schedule, and personal property, which depreciates on a 5-year schedule. Okay. And there's a lot of things in a property, obviously, depending on which type of property, there are different types of things that are in there, but a lot of things that you might not consider personal property, but anything like furniture or fixtures, all the electrical outlets, lighting, appliances, any equipment, even carpeting or cabinets, countertops, things that are not part of the structure. Okay. So the walls, doors, windows, roof, that's all structural. Those things are integral to the property. You can't have, but all the other little tiny things can be removed. And so they're considered 5-year personal property, which means an engineer will come, identify how much of that there is in the property, assign a value to those items, and then take that value and not take that as a tax deduction upfront.
Okay, that makes total sense. So you're breaking things out and trying to make the depreciation time shorter. Why would a real estate investor want to make the time of depreciation shorter?
The main reason is that if you don't, and this is a concept that applies across the board in taxes in general, if you have a way to not pay taxes legally, then it's better to do that. Why? Because even if you are just taking from taxes you might have to pay later down the road, you're really borrowing from your future self, right? In a sense. Right. And so if the IRS is saying, hey, guess what? You don't have to pay this now. So the time value of money in that you can now take that money, use that, reinvest that, you can make a lot more money than you would if you just paid the taxes. Besides for the fact that inflation is historically 2 to 3% a year, which means you're anyways making money just by taking your money now as opposed to paying the taxes later. But the fact that you can reinvest that is really the kicker.
So by pushing this depreciation forward, you get to keep more of your money instead of paying it in taxes, which means, one, you get to keep more money. Mm-hmm. Two, your money is working for you in all the ways you just described. And then I guess the third one that you didn't mention, but seems to make sense to me, is a lot of times we don't keep properties for 27 and a half years. Right. So that depreciation out on the back end, like from the point you sell that property, all the depreciation after that, obviously you don't get because you don't own the property anymore. Right. So if you're putting that depreciation closer to the front, then you're also more likely to get it as opposed to not getting it after you sell the property. Am I on track there?
Yeah, very much so. Exactly. So it's taking advantage of those deductions that you, like you said, you may not even ever see.
So that all makes a ton of sense. And so then the question is, who can do it?
So really anyone can do it. Besides for your personal residence, any type of property, if it's a business property or an investment property, you are allowed depreciation. And when you're allowed depreciation, you can take the advanced form of depreciation, which actually, according to the IRS, is the correct form of depreciation. You're actually supposed to be doing cost segregation. It just, first of all, accountants don't do it because it requires this engineering component to it. But second of all, it requires extra work involved. And so the IRS isn't going to go out of their way to tell you you're required to do something that's going to get you more tax deductions.
So okay, this all makes tons of sense. And I'm so glad that we're talking this through. I understand it so much better. Now the question I'm sure that folks are saying is, well, then how much does it cost me to do this? Can I do it myself? Obviously you do this for a living, so there's folks out there doing it. Like, what does it cost a property owner, or how can a property owner decide sort of whether it's right for them on the cost side?
Absolutely. The main rule of thumb that I give is any property that's purchased for over $500,000, and that's kind of a high bar for a lot of people, especially starting out small. But that's where you really see tremendous benefits, because the fee involved, it's usually, I'm speaking for me, for our firm, we're the biggest national firm, Madison Specs, that does this. And we charge typically on the lowest end, the smallest type of property is around $3,000, on the biggest type of properties, somewhere, upwards of $10,000. But generally it's between 4 and 6. That's your average, multifamily properties are in that range, which means that for $5,000, if you buy a property for $1 million, you're looking at easily about $150,000 to $200,000 tax benefit, which to pay $5,000 for makes a lot of sense, right?
Absolutely.
But once you start, just taking those multiples and you say, oh, well, what about $100,000 single family house that I own? Well, you'd still have to pay around the same amount of fee because the work involved is pretty much the same for us. and you're only going to be getting about a $15,000 to $20,000 tax benefit. So does it really make sense to pay a few $1,000s to get a few $1,000s of tax benefit? Usually the answer is no, right? It washes itself out. So that's really why I set that rule of thumb where $500,000, $500,000 purchase price, it's usually a no-brainer at that point. There's enough benefit that it makes sense. And beyond that, it's because, again, what we're doing is we're allocating a percentage of the property into these faster categories. And those percentages are typically generally the same. Obviously, every property is different, every asset's different, but for multifamily properties, typically between about 20 and 30% of the property into those faster categories. Other types of properties may have more. Some, like warehouses, would have less because there's less personal property there. But when you're multiplying that, you're buying a $10 million building, right? Or a $20 million, or you're buying multiple properties.
Then it starts to make a lot of sense.
A lot more sense, exactly.
Cool. So it's definitely something you want to have someone do for you, and definitely something that there's a cost associated with, a significant cost in some ways. So, $500,000 sort of a rule of thumb is the basement of where you would decide to do this, unless you have some other reason that makes sense to you for a smaller property, or maybe a group of properties or something like that. What are we missing on? I mean, I get it. I totally get it. It makes so much sense to me, and I understand why you would do it. So I don't really have any more questions. Do you have more to talk about on this topic?
I'll add a few more things. I mean, we could go on for ages, but I really just want to drive home a couple more points. The first thing is you always want to get a free estimate. So that's something we provide for anyone who wants to get a free estimate and analysis on any property. Say, well, it doesn't even make sense for me. How can I even make that decision? Should I discuss with my accountant? The answer is yes. So we provide a free analysis. So we'll tell you upfront, you'll know what your tax benefits will be by doing a full cost segregation study even before you spend a dime. So that's something you always want to do. And then discuss that with your accountant and see if it makes sense for your situation, because everyone's situation is different. You may have other losses from other places. You may not have enough income to even need those extra deductions. Right? Because again, we're just using these deductions to offset income. But if you don't have any income, it's not going to help you. The second thing I'll say, which is very much coupled with that, is there's something called a real estate professional. And a real estate professional is a tax term that you actually check a box in your tax return saying that I've spent more than 50% of my time in the real estate trader business, either myself or my spouse. And if one of us fulfills that requirement, then we actually can now take those depreciation losses, which are normally only used against rental property income. The depreciation is a passive loss. It can usually only be used against rental property income, which is considered passive income. But if you're a real estate professional, you get like this golden ticket, which says you can now use any extra depreciation, any extra losses to offset any of your ordinary income. Which this is who cost segregation is going to make sense for the most, because by creating all these extra deductions, you might just be creating a passive loss, which you can't use beyond your rental property income. And so you're just going to carry that forward. You use it next year. But if you're a real estate professional, you can actually go ahead and use that against any ordinary income as well.
Now it goes up against whatever other money you make on top of your rental income.
Exactly.
And can really bring down all of that.
And so that's huge. That's probably the biggest thing. The third and final thing I'll say, obviously, everyone's situation is different. You should discuss this with your tax advisor. There is something on the back end that when you sell a property, you actually have a tax called depreciation recapture tax, which is a thing that you have to think about. You have to know about that down the road. When I sell this, if and when I sell this property, I'm going to have to pay a tax on the amount of depreciation that I took. So yes, I may be getting the benefits now, but later on I may have to pay that back. And I say may because there are other strategies down the road that you can use to get around that as well. So, the great thing about real estate,
1031 being one of them,
1031 exchanges being one of them. And so there are definitely ways to make sure that you're not paying taxes. And that's really the name of the game. And people don't think like, well, I want to pay taxes. No one really wants to pay taxes. If there's a legal way,
right.
And that's probably why the president, right, people may like him, may hate him, whatever, but he hasn't revealed his tax returns. But he's saying, yeah, I'm in the game of paying as little taxes as legally possible because, number one, besides for the fact who knows what the government's doing with those taxes, right? But
right.
It's in the code. So a smart person is using the code for their advantage to be able to, to make their money and keep their money.
Yeah, exactly. So that makes a ton of sense. And if you, just to piggyback on the 1031 piece, if you wonder about 1031 stuff, I had Dave Foster on the show a few episodes ago. He's great. He described 1031 perfectly, and I think really helps that piece. So if you piggyback what we're talking about here with cost segregation with some 1031 stuff when you sell, so that you don't have that depreciation recapture tax, obviously we're all trying to keep as much of our own money as we can in a legal way, and that's sort of what this stuff is all about. I love it. Okay, so 5 quick questions, just information, insight for folks who are looking for other ways to learn more and create more clarity in their real estate investing practice. A book that folks should read that maybe they haven't already.
For real estate, the best book that I've read on real estate, and there's a lot of them, is Crushing It in Commercial Real Estate by Brian Murray.
I like the name.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. A conference or meetup that folks need to consider going to? In-person conferences, unfortunately, aren't happening that much anymore. I loved the IMN conferences that I was at this year, or last year, I should say. They have one, they used to have one every other month in different places around the country for multifamily. But I started a virtual meetup that is called the Real Estate Connections Virtual Meetup. We meet every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook, and come join. We have a different speaker every week, and that's a lot of fun. Cool. All right. What was the last, this one's the hardest one, I'll just have to tell you right off. What was the last free digital download that you downloaded about real estate?
Ooh, that is a hard one. I don't remember the last time I downloaded a free real estate download. It could be the one that comes to mind is on Bigger Pockets. There was they had a free download about a rental property calculator thing. I think
yeah.
so.
I feel like that one's hard.
Yeah.
I might cut that one out. Okay, cool. And then the last question that I ask every guest is, who is someone that we should have on the REI Clarity podcast that could share a little bit more insight and do like you've done for us, Yonah, just help us become better real estate investors?
A good friend, Bernard Reis, R-E-I-S-Z. He is, as much as I'm a cost segregation expert, he is a retirement account expert. So I don't know if you've had someone on the podcast discussing those things before, but using your 401k or your IRA and things like that he's a CPA by trade. He's extremely brilliant. He can talk about any subject in that, as well as any legal subject. He's also an insurance, has a license in that. It doesn't do it, but really smart guy. So I would highly recommend him.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll reach out to you and see if you can connect us. All right. If folks want to find you, they've gotten something out of this and they feel like connecting with you is something they'd like to do, or maybe they just want to have a cost segregation analysis, how can they do so?
Best way to find me is on LinkedIn, as we spoke about before. And so please reach out to me there. Put a little note when you send a connection request that you listen to this episode, and then I'll know that where you found me. You can also go to YonahWeiss.com. So that's a place where you can get a free analysis. Also our company, Madison Specs, big company, MadisonSpecs.com. You can find us there as well.
Cool. Yonah, thank you so much for coming on REI Clarity. I felt like it was a great conversation. I really learned a lot. I've really enjoyed being a part of your world and watching you out there in the social media spaces. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Special thanks to Yonah Weiss for taking the time to share his insights with us. I, as always, am now feeling inspired about connecting on LinkedIn, on commenting on 9 posts using that 18-cent rule. I understand cost segregation so much better, and for those larger portfolios, it's definitely something of value that you can keep more money in your pocket. So I'm asking you, who do you know who needs to hear this? Who's that friend that is dreaming of taking a leap from real estate side hustle to full-time financial freedom? Maybe they need to use social media better. Maybe cost segregation can help keep that money in their pocket. Who were you just talking with about those things? Grab your phone and send them this episode. Let's help everyone level up. We really do read every single review, so please give us a 5-star rating and a thoughtful review. Tell us what you liked and what you want to hear next. And finally, please do join us on the REI Clarity Facebook group. It is the place to get clarity, make connections, and implement the systems and strategies we talk about here. Just search REI Clarity on Facebook and look for the gold logo. All right, we'll see you there. Until the next time, here's to clarity that leads to financial freedom faster.